Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 258 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I am your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and a two-time author. Our second book is called From Letters to Leaders, Redefining New Member Education and Leveraging Belonging to Eliminate Hazing. Go and pick up that book today on Amazon. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there's nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, I will never forget the most awkward work situation that I have ever encountered in my life. The CEO of our company decided to have a Christmas party for the company aboard a boat with plenty of alcohol flowing throughout the evening. Now, his nephew worked for him at the company, and the CEO did not approve of the young woman that his nephew was dating at the time, who also happened to be an employee at the company. The now inebriated CEO took the microphone aboard the ship and proceeded to tell the entire company that his nephew was way too good for her in the most inappropriate way you can imagine. Now, have you ever experienced an awkward moment in the workplace like that? I tell you what, our next guests surely have. Elaine and Karen, they are both knowledgeable, experienced, and uniquely qualified when it comes to handling awkward and inappropriate situations in the workplace. They will share some real stories and successful solutions to shine a bright light on these outrageous situations and create a more respectful workplace for everyone. I'll tell you a little bit about Karen Teller. With over 3 decades in a male-dominated manufacturing industry, Karen has frontline experience in industries slow to accept and appreciate the talents and skills of women. She successfully navigated her career and built friendships and alliances while handling some awkward situations along the way. I'm also going to tell you about Elaine Lyerly. As the CEO of an award-winning brand marketing and public relations firm, Elaine has served clients in a vast array of industries. Over her 40-plus year career, she has experienced many inappropriate situations, and she's learned how to deal with them while achieving success for her business and for her clients. Welcome to the show, Elaine and Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be here.
That's fabulous. I love having you here. I think it's great. Obviously, we have a lot of college students that are listening here right now, here today. And I think the experience that you have in the workplace is going to be really illuminating for the college students because they've just never been in the workplace. They really don't know what to expect. And I'm sure that at some point, they're going to end up in one of these awkward situations. So it's best, why don't we just talk about it in advance so that way everybody kind of knows how to handle it. And, you know, one of the really interesting statistics that you pointed out, I was kind of looking through some of your materials, and basically one of the statistics was that approximately 77% of women are verbally harassed at work, and about 85% of them do not file a formal complaint. Now, Karen, you've had over 3 decades of work in this male-dominated manufacturing industry. Can you give our listeners, many of them are college students, give them an example of an awkward situation that you found yourself in at the workplace, and then talk to us about how you dealt with it?
Sure. I'm going to go a little bit back in time. I was a junior accountant in the early 80s. My boss was a controller. And he called me into his office at lunchtime. It was kind of weird because no one was around him. As soon as I walked in his office, the drapes were pulled down, the lights were off. I kind of felt a little awkward, and he kind of ordered me to sit down. And he said, "Karen, I'd like to kiss you." Now, he was 40, I was about 24 years old, and I just didn't think that was a good idea. And I said, "Mike, it's not," different Mike, right? So,
Not this Mike.
Not that Mike. You know, I don't think it's a good idea. Aren't you married? And I had my hand on the doorknob to get out of the office quick. And he said, "Don't tell anybody about this," like very firmly. So, I was young and naive and scared. And so I waited a little while, and I did go to what was called data processing guy manager. Now we call him an IT person, but I knew this guy, Bob, did not like Mike for professional reasons. He wasn't really performing his job. I was doing all the work as a junior accountant, and the accountant and the controller wasn't even showing up for work half the time. So I knew he didn't really think highly of my boss. So I went to him and he said, I'll talk to the HR guy for you. So he went over to HR. They called the president of the company, who was away on vacation. He came in, fired Mike, and came to my desk and apologized and said, I'm really sorry this had to happen to you, Karen. Now, my situation was the icing on the cake, but the takeaway is I had built credibility in the company because I started running at lunchtime with all the guys. A bunch of women went out. I'm the only one that kept running. I still am a runner today for health and mental reasons. But, they knew me, and they knew if I said something, it was true. So my takeaway and my advice to everybody, men and women, would be to build credibility outside of your sphere where you work. Make sure you have other managers that know you, not just your immediate one. Make sure that you build those relationships yourself.
Wow, those are really great tips. I'm happy you shared that story, and a wonderful tip there at the end. Elaine, you're the CEO of an award-winning brand marketing and public relations firm, and you've also experienced some inappropriate behavior in the workplace. Talk to our listeners a little bit about what happened to you and how did you deal with it?
Sure. So I'll share my most outrageous story. I made a big marketing presentation to one of our large clients. And when I finished, I asked for feedback, and the CEO leaned forward and said, "Ain't no goddamn woman gonna tell me what to do." And I was really stunned and floored. I really didn't know what to do. And he got up, walked out, and slammed the door. And so what happened was, after that, luckily, he was not my day-to-day contact. So the day-to-day contact was a great guy, and they implemented every single thing that we recommended. And even today, the brand that we developed is running all over the Southeast part of the country with what we recommended. So what happens really for women in these situations is they don't know how to cope. It happens and we don't know how to respond. So I've learned the hard way, as Karen has over the years, how to deal with these situations. And if it wasn't for my day-to-day contact, who was a great guy, and Karen's going to talk about great guys and allies later, I think it would have been a very different outcome.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think the more we talk about it, the better we can make it going forward. So I thank you both for sharing those stories. Now, Karen, give us some responses. Give us the 5 key responses to inappropriate situations in the workplace.
We kind of put them into the 5 categories, as you said. The first one is called the manhandler. And that's the situation I just used for an example. Make sure you get a man to help you out to handle the situation. If you're a woman and you feel uncomfortable with them, today people are feeling uncomfortable coming forward in a lot of situations. It's happening in colleges today, with sexual abuse, and not just even verbal abuse, but that is a big subject right now. The second one is the quick comeback. That's just be really quick in your delivery. If it's just one-on-one, you can comment really directly and quickly with the situation and say, that wasn't appropriate, or I'm not happy with what you just said, or did I just hear you say that? Right. If it's in a group setting, try to use humor. Somehow just bring some humor into it, but don't be loud or angry, just be firm. We also have a category called the velvet hammer. So that's explaining the inappropriate comments or situations in a very genteel way, but while carrying a great big stick behind your back, so that you that, you got, I say stick over gun, because we'll just use a stick. So you want to be firm, but you, and get your point across. And then there's a say nothing, but do something, right? You can do something in response, but you don't have to say anything. And my favorite, which is, if you're counting, number 5, is I'm not your Betty Crocker. Growing up, my mother used to say, I'm not Betty Crocker. And I always thought that Betty Crocker was like a Martha Stewart. And she wasn't a person. She was invented in 1921 by a man who was doing an ad for a flour company. And a retired executive's last name was Crocker. And they just thought Betty was a good first name. And so she never had a person, face until the 30s. So the Betty Crocker category is like, by the way, you can get your own coffee, right? Men oftentimes think women are the ones that order lunch and get their coffee. And, and even if you're peer-to-peer, they expect you to make the coffee. So don't be the Betty Crocker. So that's some of our 5 tips.
I like those tips a lot. I really, really do. Now, Elaine, talk to us a little bit about this power with, not power over at work. What exactly did you mean by that?
Yeah, so I've studied this over the years to really see how men and women do things differently, and they define power differently. So men see power as control and hierarchy. In other words, it's power over a group, power over a person. But women see power as collaboration and sharing and understanding, and that is power with. So power with is the kind of power that binds families, it creates relationships, it builds societies, and it runs companies, both large and small. And it's not the kind of power that goes to war. Women are not interested in sending their children to war. So through collaboration and understanding and working things out, power with has a very different outcome than power over.
Yeah, I like that explanation. I love power with. That makes total sense to me. As the CEO of my company, that's the way I look at it as well. It's collaboration, getting as many people together in on this as I possibly can. Because you know what? There are some things I do really well, and then some things that I'm really not good at. And so I depend on everybody else in my team to get us the best results. And that's kind of that collaboration piece that I believe in so much. Now, Elaine, one other question I had for you. You talked about, different types of men that might be in the workplace, right? So you've kind of identified 3 types of men that you would find in the workplace. How can our audience find them or identify them?
Yeah, I think identifying them is the real key. Like over the years, we have determined that they're the good old boys. That's group number 1. And these are really the men that are defenders and believers of the patriarchal inheritance and male entitlement. And so they are typically manipulators behind doors. We used to think that these were the most dangerous. However, they're pretty easy to spot. So what is interesting in dealing with them is to make sure that you call them out on things. And sometimes it needs to be behind the scenes because they can retaliate to protect their male heritage if it's done in public. So the second category are the good guys and allies. And these are men who get it. They're supporters of women, girls, daughters, spouses. They are fair, they're inclusive, and they're respectful. Most fathers want their daughters to have every opportunity that guys have. So these are great men to begin to develop relationships with in the workplace. Karen gave a great story about that, how she had male allies that really supported her in her situation. So they are awesome. And when you run across them, it's great to acknowledge them for being a great guy and supporter of women and girls.
Yeah.
And then the third category, this is the most dangerous. These are the wolves in sheep's clothing, and we call them the pretenders. They put on a good appearance, and you think they're good guys and allies, but they're not. And it's easy to get sucked in, and then you get blindsided by their prejudices. And the dangerous part is they fool a lot of people, particularly their bosses. But if you peel back the facade, these guys are really good old boys. You don't see it coming, with them. So you're always caught by surprise. And they manage this facade really well. They want people to think they're really great, but you see the other side of it. So unless you've been to grandma's house with a basket of cookies and been eaten alive by this wolf, or unless you have a boss that believes in you, people would just think it's your problem and you can't get along with people. So this is the most challenging group to deal with. And so sometimes you have to look at different strategies. So one of the reasons we came up with the 5 responses is that you have a choice after you identify the kind of male that you're working with.
Mhm. Yeah, number 3 I can see would be the most difficult of all because you don't really have a heads up. I mean, this is something that could really catch you off guard. Karen, words really do matter today more than ever. So, Karen, what should new professionals and recent college graduates be paying attention to when it comes to the words that they use?
Yeah, that's a great question. Women speak about 20,000 words on average a day to a man speaking about 7,000. So we, being women and men, need to learn to be very direct, very clear in communications, and make sure that the message comes across to each other because we speak differently. So if you're not sure the person heard you, you have them repeat it back to you, and then you know that they heard you. That's a simple thing to do if you're not sure you're being clear. And I would advise men, especially going into work out of college, don't call women girls. We really hate to be called girls. It's very annoying, but it happens all the time. And also, unbelievably, today, we have so many women we've talked to that have male bosses that say, smile. You need to smile. Now, would you ever tell a man, would a man tell you to smile, Mike?
No.
It's crazy, right? It still happens. So for women, you have to be really quick in your response when a man offends you, and be very direct. We've heard women say, "You're really crabby," and so men don't say this, not even in work, but nowhere. But you're a crab today. When's the last time you got laid? Like, you should never say that to a woman, right? It's just inappropriate. But women still hear this kind of comments today.
Mm. Karen, one other thing, I'm sure you've been cut off when you've been speaking at work at various occasions. So how should somebody respond to that type of a situation at the office, and basically kind of maneuver around that loudest voice in the room that's trying to dominate the conversation?
That's a great one. I love this one. There was just a recent study done by McKinsey and Lean In organization.
Mhm.
And just last year, they took a big survey. 50% of the time, women are interrupted. And 38% of the time, a man gets the credit for the idea that the women was giving in the meeting. So there's a lot of things you can do. One is don't get louder and don't get angry. It's always a good idea to be, again, just kind and direct. But don't ignore that it happens. So often, I know I ignored it, when a man just talked over me. But here's an example. If it happens to you, you can say, "So Bill, I'm so glad you're so passionate about this. I wasn't quite finished with my points yet, though." Or if a guy steals your idea, "So Bill, thanks so much for elaborating on my idea. Appreciate that." Just simple things, but don't let it go. You got to just nip it in the bud quickly and directly. But it's still happening a lot today.
Yeah, I'm sure it happens all the time. I've seen it happen. Elaine, for our women listeners, how can they claim the power of their feminine energy?
Yeah, so that's a great subject. Feminine energy really is that power with energy, and it
Mhm.
really rises. It's rising around the world, and we see it not only in the U.S. but also in other countries where women are becoming empowered and empowering their girls. So it's really a global thing. And one of the things, if you look in the United States, 51% of the nation's wealth holders are women. And these women have a combined net worth of over $22 trillion.
Oh.
And 85%, and that's a low number, of purchases are made or influenced by women. So just think about that. Those are decisions, everything from healthcare, food, home buying, education, and on and on. So really, women own brands, but we don't act like we do. So the challenge and the opportunity is that women can take responsibility for our own growth and our own futures. And it starts kind of at an early age, like speaking up and raising our hands for opportunities. But in kindergarten, did you know that boys raise their hands much more than girls? And they raise their hands whether they have the answer to the question or not, which is very interesting. But girls tend to know the answers, but they want to be sure. So their inner dialogue is, what if I'm wrong? I don't want to be in the spotlight. I've never done that before. I'm not an expert on that. So what women have the opportunity to do is sit at the front of the room, take a seat of importance, and raise our hands. And we also need to step into challenges and things that we've never done before. Men do that all the time. And a lot of times they don't know what they're doing, or they don't know how to do it. So women need to trust themselves that we can and we will figure it out. We're not alone. We've got great support networks because that's what women do. We support each other. We talk things out. We look for understanding and we ask for input. So on the other side of that, I can't do this, is growth, opportunities, new contacts, relationships, advancement, and leadership. So the last point is women should always keep their word. And I think for the most part they do, but women are often held to a higher standard and are judged differently. So, and we hold ourselves to a higher standard. So we just need to make sure we step into the challenge, say what we're going to do, and then do it. So there are opportunities for women, and we need to claim those and claim that feminine power that's happening.
There's huge opportunities. I really wish sometimes that, I look at it, even on a college campus, women have so much purchasing power on a college campus when I think about sororities and everything that they're consuming. And then even later in life, I have fraternity men will come up to me and say, Mike, I really want to get alumni donations for our local fraternity chapter. How do you suggest that I do it? And I tell them every time, I said, you have to understand the family dynamic. My wife, she controls all the money in this household, okay? She is the one who controls the checkbook. And if you can have an alumni event that is not just the guys at the bar, but rather, a co-ed event or a family event where we can bring our kids, and, let's say it's, I don't know, a co-ed softball game or something like that with a picnic and who knows what. But if my wife has a good time, you know what she does? She looks at me and she says, Mike, cut a check to these guys because she had a great time. She's the one telling me what to do with the money. Okay. That's the real world. That's the truth. Okay. So if you want the money, you got to make sure that my wife has a good time. And so, I try to explain that as best I can. But the truth is that the women are really the ones who are controlling the money, and the purchasing power is tremendous. But sometimes I don't know if they quite understand the power that they have.
Exactly. It's time that we do understand.
It's time. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Very nice. Now, we do love good food here at the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. And Karen, I know that you are living in Boston. So I'm heading there in July. I have to do some college tours with my kids. And I want to know, give me one local restaurant that I can, take my family to when I'm in town in Boston.
Okay. Well, first I'm going to tell you that there are 10 colleges within 10 miles of where I live. So you got a lot of opportunity to look around. So I'm a little fussy as far as food, and I like my hood. I live in the South End, not to be confused with South Boston, which is the Irish section. The South End is the Victorian end of Boston. It's beautiful. There's a great restaurant if you like Greek food called Kava, so you might like that. Metropolis is my favorite. It's a small, it's a neighborhood restaurant. It's great. Petit Robert for French is non-fussy, beautiful French. And my favorite is a non-chain steakhouse. It's been there a really long time. It's called the Grill 23. If you go there, if you want a big fat steak and a good meal, it's beautiful. It's in an old bank building. Dine upstairs with the locals, not downstairs. And I would say take the kids to Little Italy too. So we have a whole section called the North End. Every restaurant's great, but I recommend Luca. So there's a few for you there.
Oh my goodness. You gave me a whole menu. I mean, which is great actually, because I'll probably be in Boston 4 or 5 days. So now I can really kind of sample each one of those. And I'm going to give you a full report after I'm done. So I'll let you know what I think about each one. All right.
Okay. If you need any help with reservations, let me know.
I definitely will. Now, Elaine, I'm sure our listeners really enjoyed this interview. I think it just gives them insight into the workplace before they get there. So it helps them, in terms of anxiety and feeling all this pressure. Now they kind of have some methods and, some ways to deal with this. And I'm sure they want to continue the conversation with both you and Karen. Maybe bring the two of you in to speak on their college campus, for example. So where is the best place for our listeners to go and to connect with the two of you?
Great. So Karen and I are just getting started with our outrageous things men say to women in the workplace. So we're in the process of building out our website and social media platforms. But in the meantime, we would love to hear from you. And we can be emailed at outrageousthingsmensay@gmail.com. And we would love to hear stories from you and everybody that's on listening in today. And we invite you to share your outrageous stories with us too. And we may be sharing those too as future rollout of our idea.
You know what? I love this idea. I think it's fantastic. You could almost build a website where essentially you have this, place where we can store all the stories and the comments and all the outrageous behavior, because everybody who's been a professional at some point has seen completely outrageous behavior in terms of some of the things that men say to women in the workplace. And you just need to collect them, save them, and just let people scroll through them on your website, because it would be fascinating, because everybody has a story. I have a story. You have stories. We all have stories. And it's like one is more outrageous than the other. And it's almost like I don't even know where to begin with half of these comments. So, even if it's just that, collecting all of the outrageous stories, and then you basically have a collection of them. You could print a book. Who knows what you can do with all of this, but sky's the limit for you two.
Yes.
Thank you.
Our great entertainment.
Yeah, it's definitely entertaining, if nothing else. And I think we just need to start collecting some of these stories in one place. And maybe that's your website. I mean, I think that there's something to it there for sure. Well, listen, thank you so much. This has been great. Karen and Elaine, you guys are the greatest. I'm so happy that we had a chance to talk today and that you're sharing your stories with our audience. And to our audience listeners, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please like it and share it with other students on campus. And we hope to see you on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks for joining us today, and we will see you next time.